You're listening to Back to the Roots podcast with Mike Klein and Brian Wood, and today we are sitting in central Holmes County with Jeff Miller, the owner of Bear Cave Farm, and he is going to talk to us about his organic operation. So thank you so much for joining us today, Jeff.
Well, yeah, this is a interesting opportunity to present my farm. I've been involved with farming for my whole life, actually, growing up on a conventional dairy farm with Holsteins. We always used milkers, but we never had a bulk tank. And so in 1990, Dad ended up selling the cows, and I started working a job in construction and then in a woodworking shop. But my heart was always in farming, so I stayed. I had a little bit of rented ground that I worked with, so I had some beef cattle and ended up getting sheep also. So I played around. That's when I started getting into rotational grazing. And as far as on the organic trail, at that point I wasn't, but the neighbor to the north, the farm to the north of my home farm was Rob Schlaba, one of the startup guys here in Holmes County, along with David Klein, a good friend of mine, that started shipping to Organic Valley. So at that point, I started hearing about organics and seeing organics in real life on their farm, and was always attracted to that, even though I grew up on a conventional farm with low spray, but still we did do some spraying. So I had that rotational grazing with the beef cows and the sheep all through from 1993 is when I got the beef cows, up until 2006 when we moved to my wife's home place here.
Okay, that's what my question. When did you move here?
2006.
2006, and you had your beef cows on your mom and dad's farm.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I had 7 acres myself, and then I rented another about 13 acres. So I brought the beef cows to the farm here for the first 2 years, and then I sold those, because when we moved here, by the way, we moved to the farm here on April 1st of 2006, and so for a while there I wasn't quite sure, was this all an April Fool's joke or not, but it ended up working out okay for us, I would say.
You started farming right away then, full time?
No.
When you moved here?
No, I was working at a gazebo and lawn furniture place in a local town, and so in 2006 we moved here. I was full-time there in a management position, and so we bought dairy calves, and dairy calves were sky high at that point. Holstein heifer calves were close to $700 at that point, and for crossbreds I was paying up to $400, which I look at the local sale barn now and see really nice crossbred calves go through there, and you could buy whatever you want for less than $150 a piece. And I'm thinking, man, what a golden opportunity. But now we're not signing anybody up, so so that's the difference, I guess. And so I bought about 22 calves, something like that. I lost a couple. I probably made every mistake in the books, of course, starting out, and I wanted to go organic right away. The first year we moved here, a lot of my land had been in grain the year before, either corn or wheat. So I had a lot of plowing, fair amount of ground that needed to go back into corn, and I had no tillage, no equipment no cultivator, nothing like that. So I ended up, that first May, we put corn out, and we did spray that first year. But that was the last and only time we used any kind of non-organic product on the farm, and it was only about 20 some acres that we actually did. So I was thinking organic right from the start. There was really no other option for me, and we've never used any chemicals products on our home garden. We've always used organic products. If we use anything at all, we try and stay completely natural. So to me, it was a slam dunk, and I wanted to go with Organic Valley. And so in 2008, we bought the calves in spring of 2006. And the next year we put a Jersey bull in with that group of heifers. I bought some more calves the following year. And so in March of 2008, we started milking. And we put in a swing 7 parlor. A lot of the work I did myself in the existing bank barn that was on the farm here. And so March of 2008, we started milking, and we shipped conventionally, but I was trying to transition, and I was on board with the Hood group, because Organic Valley at that point was not signing up. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be with Organic Valley, but
I did not realize that you were a Hood farmer until
I
just
was
now.
I was with that Hood group, so I know what it is to be in the reserve pool, and I feel for the guys that have been pushed back right now. Even though I'm being hit fairly hard by the quota right now, I'd like to see us pick up all the guys we signed up, and I don't really have any problem with that. I like the quota, even though it's affecting me fairly substantially. I just feel strongly that one way or another we need to control, have a handle on production.
So how long would you have shipped with Hood?
It wasn't long at all.
And then Hood basically sold out.
They wanted to get out.
Organic Valley picked up all the Hood members.
Yeah.
So then you came into Organic Valley, the co-op, in a reserve pool basis that was paid on utilization? Or
that sounds right, yeah.
Okay. Because you would have been paid organic premium for whatever market that came with the Hood farmers.
Yeah, I know we were being paid less than the Organic Valley.
And then that was for about a year?
Close, yeah.
Close to a year.
And then things gradually improved, and away we went, and the reserve pool status went away, and yeah, things looked good for a long time. And so in December, the first week in December of 2014, we put up that's when we moved the cows into our new barn, which is a bedded pack with 65 headlocks and a drive-through bay for the TMR and a scrape alley with a manure storage at the end, which allows me to scrape manure in there all winter. We try and clean it out late November, and then we're good until about middle of April, which allows us to haul no manure onto any frozen ground. And I really like that setup, because it really allows us to utilize our manure very, very well in a way that's friendly to the land,
When did you build that barn?
We started in the fall of 2014,
okay.
But then we moved the cows actually into it in first week in December, and it was fairly cold by that time, so it was time to have it ready to be operational. And the cows have loved it, and we have really liked it.
Now I want to go back to when you first started looking at organic. You said you moved to this farm, and it was fully your intention, or you were intrigued by organic moving here.
Yes.
Was it the grazing side of things, or was it just that you had, like you said, Schlaba and David?
It was a combination. I'm a guy that grew up reading the Stockman Grass Farmer, Acres magazine, Mother Earth News. So call me whatever you want to, but I always thought that line. I've always been suspicious of chemicals and don't necessarily buy the thing that you can spray Roundup and then it kills everything that, everything green, but then it just magically disappears and nothing negative ever happens. To me, it's just, I guess I'm a skeptic, and that saying that if it sounds too good to be true, then it actually probably is kind of the way I look at things.
Now, was this farm, was it just being cash cropped when you moved on here?
To a certain point, when me and Ina married, I guess I took my father-in-law's main milking help away, and that was in 1993. And at that point, he sold his dairy herd, but he also put up a 500-foot poultry building, a broiler house, that same year. So from 93 until we moved to the farm in 2006, he was raising broilers. He also did some custom heifer growing for neighbor or relatives.
So there was livestock.
There
on
was
here,
livestock.
So
and
he had livestock manure going onto this farm.
He also had sheep.
Okay.
But he was cash grain cropping corn, wheat, oats, some, and I know he sold straw and hay. He was basically selling all of his production, and he had, the farm's 60 open acres with 30 acres of woods. And so I've got that, and I've since expanded where I rent another about 120 acres, which in a way is almost unbelievable to me, because when I moved to the farm here, all of my friends in the area and neighbors that I knew assured me that I would not be able to find any land to rent because of the heavy competition from neighboring farmers, and then there's actually two guys that do serious cash grain cropping, and they're both really large and aggressive as far as renting land. But I've been pleasantly surprised in the fact that when I decided, well, that means I need to take good care of my own land and raise as much feed on my own, that land that I do control, that when I guess some of the neighbors saw my crops, and they wanted their land farmed organically. And so all of a sudden I had a guy approach me, and then a year or two later another guy approaches me and wanted to know if I would be interested in farming their land. And so I've tried to expand slowly, but and about 20 acres of that is pasture ground that doesn't get cropped, obviously, but So
do you have one or two boys working home on the farm?
One. There's more help available in tight, but I mean it's one. And on a grazing farm, through the winter we actually barely have enough work for me and one of the boys, but I guess
even during deer season.
No. I'm talking work, Mike. But we try and have a fairly relaxed time, and I consider myself a serious deer hunter, and so my son that's helping him on the farm is not a deer hunter, so it works out perfect that way.
Perfect.
So on some of this ground, like the home farm here, it sounds like it wasn't totally run down because there was livestock, but on some of the rented ground you were taking on, and what I guess where I'm going is, what have you seen as far as improvements on the ground and what have you done to get to that point?
What I've seen has been very interesting. On the home farm, I always said that the fertility was pretty good right when I got it. And I credit that to the livestock that was on the farm previously, and also especially the broiler house. puts a tremendous amount of fertility onto a farm. Okay, so now the farm is extremely rocky. I have a local excavator that does project. If I do like a cow lane or whatever, I always get the same guy, and he always calls me Rocky Chef because I have the rockiest farm he's ever worked on. That being said, I can handle the rocks. I mean, we don't do any seeding at all without picking rocks off a field, and but the fertility is what concerned me the most. Now, that being said, the fertility was there, but on the home farm here, in 2008, I did my first soil testing, and one of my best fields at that point had a little bit over 2% organic matter. And the last time I tested that was 2 years ago, which would have been in 2016. And at that point, it was over 4%. It wasn't 5% yet, but we're getting close. Mm-hmm. So I really like. I feel that's extremely important. I put a lot of. I mean, I watch organic matter closely. I feel that builds in your drought resistance, which we're right now. We're getting into a serious drought here right now.
Mm-hmm. Isn't it crazy? We went from wet. I mean, and it dried off fast.
Yeah, it just quit here. I mean, we were too wet, and then it just quit raining, just
but
like that. But
the increase in organic matter can hold on to that moisture longer.
Yes, exactly. It all helps that. It's like it. Well, the saying is, it drought-proofs your farm. Now, so some of the things that I'm doing, and I started foliar spraying. Do you know, Mike, when that was? You've always sprayed it for me.
Yeah,
it's 4 years.
I think this would be the fourth summer.
Yeah. Okay, so I started out with Liquid 6, but that was a one-time deal there. I saw good results, but then Soil Biotics, I kind of switched to their products. It was readily available, local, at a good price, I felt.
And that is a humate-based product, right?
Yes. So I started foliaring with Soil Biotic humate, and I also used the molasses and the liquid fish. At first, Soil Biotics didn't have a liquid fish, and we used, what was the product?
Organic Gem, I believe.
Yeah, Organic Gem, that's right. But then the last 2 years, Soil Biotics has their efficient product, and so I've been using that. And I immediately saw good results. Watching my cows going onto the land that had been foliar sprayed, I could tell that they acted different. And that first year I wanted to do half of my grazing land foliar and half not, just to see how much difference. But the cows really didn't let me do that. They were so unsatisfied going from the foliar land to the non-foliar land that I decided, you know what, I'm not going to fight with my cows all summer. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, I've been foliar spraying ever since. And really, for the production that I'm getting, for example, this year, I always struggled with I couldn't get protein levels over about 19%, which that in itself is not too bad, but I was having too many fields that I was getting 16, 17% protein. And if you want a really heavy forage diet, that becomes a little bit problematic. You need higher protein or I felt that way. So when I started foliaring, a lot of my fields jumped up into that 20 to 23% protein range, and I felt that it was more true protein and not as much funny protein.
Did you see an increase in energy levels as well, your NEL, or not necessarily?
We did some, yes. But then it was the increased feed quality that I was really after. But I've seen an increase in yield also. For example, just last year I picked up a 20-acre field from a guy. It had been strip mined, and it had been organically farmed, kind of switched back and forth between soybeans and corn for the last couple of years before I got it. The guy that had it, one of his sons wanted to go onto the wheat harvest that year, so he wanted to downsize just a little bit. And the guy came to me and asked me if I'd be interested in farming that, and I said, yeah, I'd give it a try. And we looked at it. It had been in soybeans the year before, and it was soybean stubble spring of 2017. And he come to me, and it was already, we were right in the middle of May, the busy work. We were swamped with work, and I wasn't quite sure. And we looked at it, and we decided it really should go into hay, just because the yields weren't that great with the corn and soybeans that were coming off. It was, strip mined soil is a project.
Challenge.
It's a challenge. It's a big time challenge. But it laid nice, and I was like, well, we'll give it a try. We'll try and put it in hay. And so we seeded it into hay the first week in June. And I was probably more lucky than anything else, but we almost got perfect weather for the first 2 weeks after we seeded it. We got cooler weather and plenty of rain, and it just took off. And so we hadn't put any manure on purpose because I didn't want to stimulate all the weeds. So we waited until that fall to put manure on. But we did foliar it. We took 2 cuttings off, and it did very well. I was very, very pleased. And my share of the field is 8 acres, and then we do 6 for him. But that being said, this spring, it was the last. I didn't seed any orchard grass, so it was absolutely a picture. And towards the end of May, we went in there. It was my last field of first cutting that I made, and it was a lot of red clover in there. So it was just ideal stuff. And we mowed that 8 acres and put it up as baleage, and it made 90 4x4 item size, just a touch over 4 feet, 4x4 bales off of that.
Of how many acres?
8 acres.
8 acres.
And so almost exactly 4 weeks later, which was just like 2 weeks ago here, it was the last of our second cutting that we made, and it made 59 bales. So in 2 cuttings, that field has produced 149 4x4 bales for us.
Of high quality hay.
Of extremely high quality, dairy quality hay.
Did you have alfalfa in it too, or was it?
A little bit of alfalfa.
How did the alfalfa take there? And
it did very well. Mm-hmm. We put lime and gypsum on. That was right before we seeded it, and then we waited until that fall to put broiler manure on, and then we took 2 cuttings off last year, and between after every cutting we put a foliar on.
Okay.
And we did the same thing this spring. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, I just look at some, and the foliar is running me. I think we've talked about this, Mike. I mean, the foliar costs me right around $20 an acre. Mm-hmm.
That's per application.
That's per application.
So you're trying to go 3 or 4 applications a year,
at least on the hay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I'm
so
doing 4 or 5 cuttings
at $80 to $100.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But you feel that you're making that back easily, and
if you
get one more bale, it basically pays for it. That's
my point. I sell hay. I have more of the hay than my cows can utilize, and if I get two bales in a year extra, it's all paid for. Mm-hmm. So what I see is my fertility keeps going up. My soils become more balanced. I have less weed pressure. Everything to me is a win-win. I mean, the biggest thing is to actually get out there and do the application. And I guess that's where Mike and his rig comes in to makes life easy for me. I still have to be here to get the stuff ready and mixed to go into the sprayer tank. But, the other morning we did 4 tanks. Well, it took us, it was 3 hours or something like that.
And it's really nice because I've got actually one of the Organic Valley members' son who he works part-time, doing the spraying, and I just text him, tell him, hey, Jeff has spraying tomorrow morning, and he'll come get the rig, gas it all up at my house, and it's
scheduled for tomorrow morning.
Oh, he is?
Again,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, and the number one thing that I hear as far as foliar spraying, and it sounds like one of them, you're kind of saying you're seeing the opposite, is that that when you do the foliar spraying, it will help that cutting of hay. It won't necessarily, it's money that is not going into the soil, it's only going into the hay. And you're saying you're seeing almost the opposite along with manure, but foliar spraying. And then the other thing is that it's too much time committed to.
Yeah. I do hear some negative things about foliar. The common thing is that you just don't get enough effect from it. And I think I'm kind of trying to figure out why some people are experiencing. I'm not questioning that's what they're experiencing, but I wanted to start foliaring earlier, and I felt I needed to spend the money that I had available at that point to get more lime on my land, gypsum, some of the other stuff that if you don't have that, if your pH is too low, foliars are not going to solve that problem. Okay, so I think that's what I'm seeing with people are not putting the amount of lime on their land that they should on a regular basis. I try to put 500 pounds of lime, 300 pounds of gypsum. I have a local guy that has an application business, and he mixes it together for me and applies it at that rate, 800 pounds total. That's the lowest amount he can apply at one time with his truck. And usually we try and hit every acre in July and August. Any field that wasn't seeded in the spring, which we try and any field that we seed, we try and put the lime on at that point. But then if we do it in July and August, oftentimes we're very dry, and so we're not making any ruts or doing a lot of compaction with the truck going across the land.
Well, and that's one thing I was going to say earlier, and it sounds like you're kind of saying it here too, is that once you get the big soil issues taken care of, like you said, whether it's pH or calcium isn't there or whatever it is, then get those things corrected, then foliar can kind of unlock that next level of potential in your soil.
I look at it kind of, you can have a really good cake, but then the foliar is the frosting that you put on a already good cake, But if you just put frosting on cardboard, you don't have much. No. And I think that's kind of what we're
But I also see that you are more dedicated to foliar spraying than anybody else in this area. Okay? I mean, there's some that are very dedicated, but not as consistently over a 3 to 4 year period like you have been. So I think it takes consistency and stick with a program. This one shot spraying one time is not going to be like spreading a ton of urea out there. Yeah. You will not see it turn green right behind the sprayer. Yeah. So it's kind of a big picture plan that needs to be in place. But what I've seen happen on your farm has been really tremendous. Now you say your organic matter is going up. Do you think as your microbiology gets better and better, do you think you'll hit a limit on organic matter because it turns into humus that fast?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure where our limits are at. I hear different things. A lot of the guys that have foliar products to sell, John Kempf even says that eventually you should get to the point where you don't need foliars.
Which is not a good business model.
Well, maybe not, but
Yeah.
but if he's honest, and I take John as a as a honest person, is yet that's what we're aiming for, to improve our soils and get them to the point where you can sustain the fertility with manures and other lime and gypsum and whatever is determined that you need, but it'll be at a reduced rate. I just think that we don't take into account, a lot of people don't take into account the amount of minerals that are leaving, like say if you sell a cull cow and you raised her on your farm, everything in her body, came off your farm. And it's going out the farm lane.
Look at every time the milk truck goes.
Exactly. Look at all the calcium that's leaving. Where's that coming from? It's coming from your soil. Okay. If you don't have a, and in organics, I always say, I'm not sure where I learned it, but a little often is much better than a lot just every once in a while. In other words, one guy, or a lot of the conventional guys, my understanding is that they'll put 3 tons of lime on every 3 or 4 years. Okay, well, I like my idea of putting 500 pounds on every year. Much better than that. But I'm not saying that the other way doesn't work, but I think in organics it's better to do more often and less.
And I think another thing is really helping your soils get better is you never have bare ground.
Yeah.
So, when you put a new seeding in or you plant corn or something, a very short amount of time. But so you've got something photosynthesizing on your acreage almost year round with your cover crops and everything else that you're doing. You're basically harvesting sunlight all year long.
Yeah.
And I don't think that gets enough credit. Right now, cover crops I just read an article today that the Chesapeake Bay watershed, parts of the watershed are 60% of the land has cover crops on it now, and they're already seeing a huge difference in water quality.
I believe that. Yeah.
Just from, they're actually harvesting sunlight and they're keeping the stuff there.
I mean, I guess I just really, since I'm doing it on my farm, I really notice what's going on if I'm driving the road in the area. And I don't know if you noticed it this last year, but we've been getting some tremendous heavy rains. It just like cloudbursts almost, where you get inches of rain in less than an hour. A good friend of mine out in Nashville, just like less than 2 months ago, it rained 4.5 inches in less than an hour. And the damage that does on unprotected soil is unbelievable. Now, if we put in crops, we are exposed to a certain extent. We always, anytime we do tillage, we are exposed. But you want to keep that window as small as possible. And I saw some of the worst erosion on like soybean fields this spring.
Yeah.
On soybean stubble that I've ever seen. It was just unbelievable.
Just about a mile from our house over at the on my road going north, they had just ran the airway through bean stubble, and it rained 3.5 inches. And where it didn't even look like it was sloping, no waterways, nothing.
Yeah.
And there should have been a 15-foot waterway there. It was washed out 3 feet deep, and it just looked like veins coming all the way down through there. As soon as it dried out, what did they do? They worked it again. They planted, and it rained again, and now they've got washouts. All you need is a waterway there. Yeah. If you're going to till, that 15 feet of not getting a crop on it's going to do you a lot more good than trying to plant and plow right through it.
Yeah.
It's so I can't.
But it's 15 foot out of production that that might add up to 2 acres.
Exactly. The last 2 years, the same field, within a mile, maybe a mile and a half of my farm here, the field has been in corn. I don't know, last 6 years maybe, something like that. But again, no waterways, and there's swales in there where there should be waterways. And both times the county has to bring out their equipment and clean out the ditch. The entire ditch fills up with topsoil, and it runs out onto the road. It washed big rocks that if you'd have hit these rocks with your vehicle while it was right when it was raining. I mean, people put the rocks off the road because it would have damaged the vehicle. That's how bad it was. And a simple waterway would have completely solved it.
Mm-hmm.
It hurts me to actually see it,
Well,
even though it's not my land.
It'll never
It
come
goes
back.
into our creeks, and that's public. That's not just the landowner's creek. It's the American citizens'
Yep.
creek, and
that field will
ultimately
never.
It hurts both the public and the farmer
does,
because the
it
farmer
does.
will never ever get that topsoil back, and
Exactly.
that stream will.
I think you see the worst of that on rented ground.
Oh, I agree.
I'm just sad to
Because-
say that, but
Yeah, when people rent land, they're trying to make money out of it.
exactly.
Unless it's a long-term agreement, like the stuff that you do, you're trying to build that land up so when you're done using it, it was profitable for you, but you left it better for generations. But when you're looking at just running it for profit, you're trying to just put enough inputs on there to get you a crop, not to build it long-term.
But you're a case of, and I've got farmers in the same situation, that that you got landowners that have seen that situation happen, and they don't want it anymore.
Exactly.
So they're coming to people who are
That's right.
doing the
Yep.
correct practices,
Absolutely.
and you get those opportunities.
I didn't mention when we were talking about these crops, but two of my guys the example of that 8-acre field with the 90 bales of first cutting, that's the one landowner. Then I have my biggest landowner, single biggest guy that I rent from. Both of those guys have some of the land I custom farm for them. And, I think it's very revealing because both of them they didn't talk to each other, I don't think. But both of them tell me that, whatever you're putting on your crops, do the same with mine and then just send me the bill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that tells me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them have some beef cattle and horses and stuff like that. So
Well, they see that what you're doing is working.
Exactly,
And
yeah.
they like what you're doing. So, I think that's a testament on your farming practices right there.
also I just want to give credit to my biggest landowner that I rent from. He had an offer. I was trying to rent that land from him. Made him an offer. He come back to me and said one of the big grain guys found out that he has some land that he's looking at renting out, and he made him a offer that I couldn't match. And I said, well, I can up my offer a little bit, but I can't match that. And he took substantial less because he said he wants to see it farmed organically. If he ever wants it back and wants to farm it himself, he wants it organic.
Okay.
That was so I thought that was, that's what organic means to a lot of people. Even though they're not organic, there's a lot of, and he's a fairly young guy. And so he's thinking organically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's now as you're, you've grown the farm and you've grown the herd. Now you're probably the herd isn't growing right now quite like you would like it to.
Actually,
because
I've leased out cows because of my quota.
But what number of cows did you start with, and where are you now, and where would you like to be?
Well, I started with about 25 that first year, and always wanted to get up. I knew, in the old barn, I could handle about 35. Okay, so as soon as we put up the new barn in the fall of 14, and I was maxed out. I needed that new barn because I had more. I was like at 40 cows, and I was just growing from within. I was retaining all of my heifers, and so it's been the last 2 years now. I'm at when the quota hit, I was in the upper 40s, almost at 50 cows. And then I had all these heifers in the pipeline. And I didn't realize at the time, I should have done my paperwork, but I was growing more than a 10% rate. And that's enough to really hit you hard if you get caught in a quota situation. And so I kind of shifted gears. I'm only keeping about less than half of my heifer calves. So I like to keep 6 heifer calves in the spring and 4 in the fall. It gives me 2 groups, just not a lot, small groups. They do really well, and that's for my culling rate. That's been plenty, actually.
So you want to stay around 50 cows?
Well, I'd like to, if the quota would disappear, I'd like to go to 55, and my barn is sized for 65.
Okay.
And I wanted to see what the farm would handle. My grazing acreage is what's going to limit me. I can produce plenty of feed off of rented ground. Like I said, I'm selling feed already. So I'd already have more than enough feed to feed 65 cows. That being said, it's my grazing acreage that's going to limit me a little bit. I do have one field that I could go after. It's on a neighboring ground, and it's farmed by a good friend of mine that cash crops Bruce Beachy. And so far I haven't needed it, and we have a friendly agreement. I mentioned years ago to him that I might need that eventually, and I've helped him pick up other land, and I think I've got a good enough relationship with him that he wouldn't mind if I would actually start farming that if I needed it for my cows, because I can get my cows to.
How many grazing acres do you have here?
43.
43.
Yeah. So you can see how that kind of limits me, even though I'm getting tremendous production off of those 43 acres.
But that 43 acres would just be for the milk cows?
Yeah.
And some young heifers maybe? Or
no, that's just for the milk cows.
For the
I
milk
do
cows.
have some additional acreage, and actually as my heifer numbers go down, and then I picked up a little bit of pasture ground this last spring that allows me to get even more of my bigger heifers off the farm. Some of these, I could actually add another about 6 or possibly 8 acres of my own ground right here around the buildings that I was using for heifer.
You would be concerned with 65 cows on 43 acres? You think that'd be cutting it a little shorter than you like?
That would, yeah. That for me. Now,
what percent dry matter do you shoot from pasture?
Well, I had been up hitting 70 or better, but this last winter we got a TMR, and the cows really like the TMR ration, and so in the spring, of course, when the grass is really lush, the cows first getting out on pasture, their consumption went down on the TMR ration, but it didn't go to nothing. I was still fairly happy with what they were eating in the barn. And then as time goes on, and especially now that we're in the really heat of the summer, these afternoons that it's getting up into, we've had so many days where we're in the upper 80s and even low 90s here, and the cows go out in the morning and it's really humid, and they'll graze for a couple hours, but I've got fans in the new barn, and there's TMR mix there. They're not dumb. They're like, we're going for the barn, and we're going to kick back and relax.
This 95 degrees with high humidity is just absolutely brutal on cows.
Absolutely. And for me, it still comes back. I might be organic, but I want cows that are in really good shape. I don't want to be an embarrassment when somebody goes the road and sees my cows that they're skinny or not in shape, and I want to get milk out of them. That's, after all, it's paying the bills. And so when I'm in there milking, I can go in there tonight, and it's just been a cooker all afternoon, but they're going to have a lot of milk. And so I'm sure that my intake off of pasture has gone down a little bit from that 70%, but I don't think it's going to be under like 60% because I'm on really good pasture.
Do you see better production off your pasture ground than some of your cropping ground just from the...
Yes, some of my cropping ground was literally so starved for manure when I got it that it was unbelievable. Fortunately, I have an excess of manure. I actually end up, most years I sell some. But when I picked up a good chunk of that, for the first 2 years, I sold no manure at all. Everything went on there. It was just desperately. It had been like in sheep pasture for like 20 years. And I really think that soil life, I always thought that a pasture like that would really have high soil life or whatever. I'm actually convinced it works the opposite. That an average pasture is actually not very biological active.
Really?
We did an absorption rate on a permanent pasture field, and then
a permanent pasture.
Permanent pasture
not
field.
rotational.
Were you working when we had the? Okay, so then we put was it an 8-inch pipe in the soil, then put like a saran wrap, put an inch of water in there, inch of rain, and then we did one right by the fence row where the animals weren't walking. Then we pulled them out, and by the fence row where there was no compaction from animals, it was, 3 minutes that inch of water was soaked in, and at like 25 minutes, the other one, there was still water setting in it from the compaction from grazing.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a huge proponent of grazing, but that's a really interesting thing. I've never heard permanent pasture anybody say that before.
So what do you think the best is? It are you doing any sort of renovating of pastures just to keep that soil life active?
Well, all 43 acres that I graze the cows on, I'm either rotating corn or sorghum sudan through. Some of it's steep enough that I don't want to put corn in because I got to cultivate it, and it's too steep. I don't want to do that. So there I will plant the sorghum sudan, and I'm actually grazing sorghum sudan right now. Or every evening, the cows go in to sorghum sudan through the day. They're on a regular pasture. So everything that they're getting, none of it is permanent pasture. My cows are never on permanent pasture.
What's the longest that a pasture field will be in pasture?
I hear I aim for about 6 years.
Do you feel that at that point that's when there's enough compaction there and the soil life will diminish?
Yes, I do. I see productivity go down, and guys will. I realize that flies, and I've met Joel Salatin, and I consider him a smart guy and all that. He's a big proponent of your permanent pastures. You let come what's there, and I'm not really knocking that. I think with it managed correctly with the right livestock and if you know what you're doing, you can definitely improve that, and that works. But for me, I just see that productivity starts going down. I see it in the amount of grass that's there when I give it a 3 or 4 week rest, and I come back with my milk cows, and all of a sudden it starts. It just looks a little bit stagnant. It's not as lush as I want it, and then that's when I realized, well, that's the next field that needs to be going to be, and it's something about plowing it. And we have a chisel plow and a moldboard plow. We have a Kernland plow, and which we really like, and so I just think picking your spots and not over plowing. We will moldboard plow, but then when I do a seeding, I like to chisel plow it. So it was moldboard plowed in either corn or sorghum the year before, and then that fall we might do a fall seeding, or we might just go in with cover crops. But we like to chisel plow it, and what that does, it gets rid of the plow furrows, and you tend to go almost a little bit deeper right where the shank is than what you will with a moldboard plow. And so it allows that moisture to go a little bit deeper, so you have better root, but then also it dries out a little bit quicker on the surface. So you can go, if you've had a rain recently, and so let's say I've got oats in that new seeding and it needs to be grazed. If you get 2 inches of rain 2 or 3 days before, your cows are going to tend to stomp it up a little bit if it's only been worked really shallow, like with a disc or whatever, because that moisture all stays kind of in the top there. If you chisel plow it, it can get down to that 8-9 inch depth, and it goes down deep enough that it's relatively dry on the surface. And so I really like that combination.
I wonder, we did an agronomy school a months ago or so, and we did a soil pit. I know there was one here in Ohio last year.
Yeah.
And then also we just took a shovel and we went into the pasture and we dug down a little bit, and we were looking at, you could visibly see some of the compaction, and it was in a pasture that was in the second year in pasture, and you could already see an inch or so of compaction. And the way that, and I kind of knew it in the back of my head, but until it was described in words, it's like putting metal plates on top of each other when you get that compaction. And those cow hooves, if you're grazing correctly, there should be plenty of weight on that pasture. So it makes a lot of sense that maybe there is still soil life in the ground, but it's after 6 years you have 6 to 8 inches of compaction.
It's just slowing down.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. And I guess this is just a farmer's observation, but I think there's something, and you know how your dad, Mike, feels about plowing. He loves to plow.
Oh, yeah.
And
plowing and cultivating.
Absolutely. But there is something about occasionally stirring your soil. I think mixing that up, I think there's acids in the soil. You're moving small rocks around, and so then I think there's just an infusion of energy, I think, in there, and then that stimulates your soil life, so you get the ball rolling again.
Well, I think Jerry Brunetti always talked about taking your top 8 inches and turning it into your top 10 inches, where you turn your topsoil like an accordion. You get it to expand and grow soil, was what Jerry always talked about.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you almost don't see as much maybe in a permanent pasture as you do in something that there's more inputs, there's more, it can breathe better. And I think a permanent pasture can be great if it's managed correctly. Grub down to the hilt in the first 6 weeks that the cows are on there, and then it's just shaved the whole year. You're just baking that.
Yeah, it's kind of like a parking lot almost.
Yeah.
I do know, if I remember correctly, Gary Simmer from Midwest BioAg was a speaker at the Dairy Grazing Conference here in Holmes County, or at Dalton, I should say. And he talked, and this was 5-6 years ago, probably at least. And he was talking about a fast rotation. How you increase fertility the fastest by having a fast rotation. And at that point, that didn't really make too much sense to me. I thought, man, I'm not sure he knows what he's talking about. But since then, I see that on my cropping ground, I'm on about a 4-year rotation. Corn 1 year, a small grain the next, and then about 2 years of hay. And
you seemingly are really making headways.
I really, really do.
That's really interesting. And what I like hearing is talking to a farmer like you, who is, nobody told you this. This is just your personal observations of what you see on your fields. That to me shows that you're paying attention and you're not just following the herd. but you're observing and farming according to what you're observing.
Well, I read a lot too, and like I get the Graze magazine, which is more dairy oriented than what the Stockman Grass Farmer is, which is more beef oriented. When I had beef and sheep, I got the Stockman Grass Farmer. Now I get the Graze. But like years ago, I read an article in I think it was Acres magazine of this farmer. I think it was from PA, and he got into vigorous discussions. Let's call it that. Vigorous discussion with other farmers and soil agronomists, because he was applying 500 pounds of lime per acre per year on his farm, and guys would tell him up front that there's no way that will work. Your pH is going to go way too high. And when he was done farming, he had farmed that farm for over 30 years, and he said his pH never went over 7, which you basically wanted, right up close to 7. And so he said, why were people telling him that, according to the books, that won't work? And yet, I always struggle with virtually all of my forage tests that I was getting the first years that I was on the farm. I was always low on calcium. And that's why I was hesitant to use the foilers, because I knew I needed to address the lime and the calcium issue first. But then calcium in forage is also tied to your soil life. It's not just the lime that you put on. If there's no soil life there, it still won't get into the plant. So you have to get that ball rolling of soil biological activity in your soil. And
so, as Dr. Paul says, like we were talking about Dr. Paul before we started recording, is one of my favorite quotes that he says is, personal observation is the most reliable source of information.
I would agree with that. Yes. I would agree.
Yeah, it's been really, really fun to see as an outsider, to seeing how this farm, we had different pasture walks and stuff over the years here, and to see how the ball's rolling and it's rolling in the right direction.
Yeah.
That's really exciting to me, is when the system starts working. Yeah. And that's when farmers really start believing in the organics, and the organic way of farming is when that ball starts rolling.
Right now we're about 2.5, almost 3 weeks into a fairly serious drought here. It's been short, but it's been serious, because we went from too much rain to really hot and no rain, and so it's come on quick. And but I was just talking to a good friend of mine, a conventional farmer, last night, and he said, "Boy, his corn is just suffering like crazy." He said he has a shallow tillage tool, and he said he can see right now that, he said, his roots, the corn on the roots, the roots on the corn are not deep enough to handle this dry weather, and it's really stressing and having that pineapple leaf look.
Yesterday,
and I just saw my first organic corn show a little bit of signs of starting to show some stress.
What's crazy is you have the light green colored corn because it was so wet. Now all of a sudden in those wet areas, you're seeing to see a little bit of leaf curl, because that wet caused compaction, and now it's dried out. And because yesterday on the way home from western part of Lake Erie, on the way home, I could not believe how stressed the corn was through northern Ohio.
Is that right?
Coming down this way. I mean, there were hundreds of acres that looked like onions.
Wow.
And, well, too much nitrogen, and then it got hot and it got dry, and it's just burning up.
The local feed mill guy here goes to our church, and he was just telling me yesterday that down by Strasburg, on some of those the knobs that I guess they're a little bit sandier or something down there, but he said they've tested it and the corn's ready to chop, moisture-wise. This is July 15th.
Oh boy! And there's no ear on it yet either.
Absolutely. So
wow.
So that's what you've got.
Hopefully, we'll get a nice couple inches
we
of
need
rain here in the
inches.
next week. End of the week, it's supposed to chance of rain, and It'll nice soaker will green things up again.
Yep.
So. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. This was really interesting, and it's really exciting to see what you've got going on the farm. So thank you.
I'm always glad to share.
Thanks a lot, Jeff.